And welcome to Preparing Your Data for an Affirmative Action Plan, and we're talking about promotion data today. My name is Carla Irwin. I am the president of Carla Irwin & Associates, and my firm does kind of everything affirmative action, from creating your plans, doing training, outreach programs, and audit support. And with me, I also have Stephanie Thomas.
Hello, everyone. I'm Stephanie Thomas, and I'm the founder of Thomas Econometrics. We are a full-service quantitative consulting firm that specializes in workplace issues. We do everything from adverse impact analysis to compensation analyses, analysis of discrimination with respect to compensation and selection decisions. So if there's a quantitative component to your workforce issue, it's something we look at. And today, we're going to be focusing on promotions.
One caveat before we go forward, there are legal aspects to what we're talking about. Neither Stephanie or I are giving you legal advice and shouldn't be construed as such. Feel free to contact your legal departments for any questions that you may have. So the first thing that we want to talk about is just what's the webinar series about. The reason that Stephanie and I wanted to do this webinar series is there's a lot of regulations that are coming out new. There's been a lot of focus on what are the new regulations, what's the new philosophy of the OFCCP, what's the direction. We really wanted to take a step backwards and say, let's get back to the basics of an AAP. Those things haven't changed, and the basics really are the data. So this series is about going through all the different pieces of data that you need from an affirmative action plan, trying to explain that to you, how we work with clients to clean that up, to validate it, and get it ready to create your affirmative action plan.
And today is the second installment in the webinar series. 2 weeks ago, we talked about hiring data. On October 12th, we'll be talking about termination. On the 26th, we'll be looking at workforce snapshot data and what the potential issues are there. On the 9th of November, we'll be talking about applicant flow, and there's a lot of developments related to applicant flow, so that should be a really interesting one. And we're going to round out the beginning of the series on the 30th of November with a discussion of compensation. So we're going to walk through the getting back to basics for each of these components with the first 6 webinars, and then beginning next year, we're going to focus on how to produce that data, how to respond to the scheduling letter, what you need to do, what you need to be aware of when you're producing that information. So we're going to take a format very similar to what we talked about last week with respect to the hiring data, only today we're going to talk about the promotion data requirements. We'll talk about what can happen if you have missing promotions data and how it can affect your analysis in your AAP. And we'll conclude with a discussion about data scrubbing and validation and common problems to look for in your promotions data.
Okay, so let's just talk about the type of data that you're going to need to start collecting in order to do analysis for your promotions. The first thing that I want to point out is to get employee level data. And what I mean by this is you want a transaction or a line for each employee that has a promotion instead of doing a summary of by EEO1 or AA job group where you just do count. You really want to have that employee level data. It's important so you can find issues, problems, and make corrections. So we're going to talk about then, once you have this employee level data, what are the fields that need to be populated in your spreadsheet? And the first is employee name or number. This is very important, and my number one request from clients is employee number. Not every company has employee numbers. Some use Social Security numbers. I always request that clients do not provide me with Social Security numbers. I don't need and or want that information, don't want them sending it to me. Employee number is better than employee name, just because when you are doing things in Excel and doing double checking, everybody has a unique number. Not everybody has a unique name. Race, gender, and ethnicity, that's pretty obvious. from and to characteristics. So what I mean about this is, and the next few bullets are going to be about what are, some more specific things, but what do I mean by from and to? Unlike your other types of data where it's hires and terms and applicant flow, you just have a snapshot at a certain point in time that you're gathering. This really needs to look at prior to the promotion and after the promotion. First, what was their job title? What was their job title prior to the promotion? What was their job title after the promotion? Same with EEO1 and AA job group code. So all of those are really important statistics, or really important characteristics to get from and to. And part of it is you're using it for different reasons in terms of from and to, whether it's adverse impact, progress towards goals, things like that. The next one is location. And so this is very important for those people on the phone that have multiple locations. If you're just doing one pull of everything, make sure the location is in there. And also, this could also be a from and to characteristic in the event that you have locations that are close together and that you have a lot of movement in between locations where you might get a promotion to another location. You might actually be changing locations also. And then also, I like to have on the promotions Excel spreadsheet is hire, rehire, termination, and the promotion dates. You might just think, well, don't we just need the promotion date? But it's a good double check if you have their hire date and or rehire date and their termination date, because there's a lot of double checking in between logs to make sure that you have all of the information that you need for the promotion log, hire log, termination log. And then finally, the type of promotion that it is. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about this in depth, but is this type of promotion a step or a bid? And what I mean by that is a step is, there wasn't an opening, the promotion was given to the individual based on a number of years of experience, a certification, a certain level that that person got to. You're moving from HR Generalist 1 to HR Generalist 2. Or was it really a bid situation where there's an opening, it's open to internal employees, and people are applying to it. So that's a really important piece of information.
And just to sort of follow up on a couple of things, Carla's giving you like what you need for the AAP perspective. She's coming at it from an AAP planning perspective. I'm also involved in the litigation and the conciliation defense side of things. So I have a little bit different perspective, so it's nice that we're going to present both perspectives to you. With respect to the hire, rehire, termination, and promotion dates, it's a good idea to have those, as Carla said, so you can do verifications and checks to make sure that things line up. But it's also important to have the hire dates in the event that your promotion system has time and job or seniority requirements. You can go back and use that to refine your applicant pool, which we're going to talk about a little later, and really, focus in on the eligible for promotion people based on those time and job or those seniority requirements. And with respect to the type of promotion, from a litigation perspective or a defense perspective, it really does make a difference whether it's a simple job progression or whether it's a competitive promotion. And again, the difference there really is in the pool of people who were eligible for promotion relative to the person who was selected. So we're going to talk about that a little bit more, but it is those two things are really critical from a litigation defense perspective. Now we also have some non-AAP suggested data, and we talked a little bit about this last week. We're going to see that these are the same kinds of things that we talked about with hiring. It's a good idea to have expanded demographic information on other protected characteristics. And other protected characteristics include things like age, disability status, veteran status, marital status, and sexual orientation, and perhaps sexual identity. And whether or not you're required to collect those pieces of information really depends on the state and the local laws that govern your particular area. Different states, for instance, recognize sexual orientation as a protected class. Other states don't. So consult with your employment attorney to find out what protected characteristics are relevant to your particular organization, particular location, and make sure that you collect that expanded demographic information if you can. It's better to have it and not need it than to need it and not have it.
And we have the disability and veteran status asterisks for purposes of those are things that are required. If there is a vets and individuals with disability AAP, you also have your vets 100 and 100A reports. Side note, those are due the end of November. You can start entering that information at the beginning of October. That's why those two things are asterisks.
Okay, so let's now talk about some required documentation. And again, the ideal form to maintain your documentation is electronically. And as we talked about last week, electronic document retention is the best way to go because it's easy, it's cost effective. You can maintain a central repository of all your information. All your different departments or locations are going to be consistent in the kinds of information they maintain if you have an electronically based system. So the required documentation for promotions are going to be any pieces of documentation that are used in making the promotion decisions. So if you have a bidding system, for instance, where employees can bid on certain openings for promotions, if you have an internal application process, you're going to want to keep documentation about that process. Not only who bids on those individual vacancies, but the information that's collected, information about the application process, who it's open to, who it's available to, all those things surrounding the application process itself. If you conduct interviews for promotions, you're going to want to keep copies of your interview notes. Those should all be maintained electronically. If there are any kind of eligibility testing and screening results that factor into your promotion decisions, you're going to want to maintain copies of those. If, for instance, performance evaluations factor in, you're going to want to make sure that you have copies of the performance evaluations, signed copies of those evaluations. You want to have documentation about the criteria that factor into the performance evaluation. All those kinds of things with eligibility and screening need to be maintained. If prior employment history or work experience factors into your promotions decisions, you're going to want to have all that information maintained as well. Probably it's not so much an issue, prior employment history outside of the firm, but for some companies you have to go through different jobs, and you have to hold different jobs for certain lengths of time before you're eligible for certain positions. So if you're working in a home improvement store and you want to be the general manager, you have to have spent time in each of the departments, and you have to have satisfied certain requirements for having experience in different departments before you're eligible for that. Any other information that you consider in the promotion process needs to be maintained. And the thing with promotions, there's no real hard and fast rule or a checklist that you can use universally to guarantee that you have all your documentation. And that's because there's variation in each company's process. It's important to understand your promotion process so you can make sure that you're documenting and retaining all of the information. The rule of thumb here is if you consider it, if it's used in your selection process, you need to maintain that documentation and you need to produce it.
And the one thing to think about is, I think everyone's really, after the definition of an internet applicant, there was such pressure on documentation. A lot of the OFCCP cases have been on documentation with regard to applicants. A lot of people forget about the promotion process, and a good rule of thumb for you is to think about promotions and documentation the same way you do about external applicants and employee records with regard to external hires and applicants. It's the same thing. Stephanie and I use that information and justifications for audit and litigation the same way we do when it comes to external hires. Okay, common missing data points. So we're going to go through, we went through the required data, now we're going to go through those things that that we see that are issues when we get data from our clients. The first one is prior job information. So when I was explaining to you what were the required fields, a lot of people are leaving out prior job information, and it's for a couple different reasons. One, not all companies have HRIS systems that hold history, so that once someone's pay or someone's grade or someone's title has changed, then that information is lost. So that is one of the issues. And if you have that problem in your HRIS system, promotions may be one of those things you have to collect annually. So that can be a problem. It's something that I see a lot. So for those clients that I know that have HRIS systems that don't have that, then they have to collect that information annually. The next one is promotion dates, and I know that kind of seems like an odd one, but here's the reason why, and I'm seeing this a lot more lately, is what is the actual promotion date? Meaning you're giving people a chance to, for the first time be a manager or supervisor. And you may give them the responsibilities, but you're not giving them the increase in pay. They've got to kind of prove themselves before they're, given the pay. So then what's really the promotion date? Is the promotion date when they get the increase in responsibilities? Is it when they get some sort of final sign-off from whomever that they have the job officially? Is it when they get the pay increase? Whatever it is, it needs to be consistent. So you can't, for some people, it'd be when they get the pay increase, and then some people when they get the responsibilities. So whatever it is, it needs to be consistent. The next one is type of promotion. So kind of the step or bid that I was talking about before, this is really important to know, and a big part of the justification if there are any kind of adverse impact issues. So I'm going to give you an example of a step or a bid, and I want this one to be really, really clear, and if anybody has questions on this afterwards, or feel free to kind of put questions into the system, or follow up with us afterwards. But I want this to be pretty clear, and clear up any questions anybody has. So the first one is, I talked about this before, someone moving from an HR Generalist 1 to an HR Generalist 2. Let's just take that. So you've been in the HR department. You have your bachelor's degree. You've been an HR specialist, and you've moved up to a generalist. Once you got your degree, now that you have your degree, once you have 3 years of experience, then you become an HR Generalist 2. So there's a kind of a progression. You're an HR specialist, then you become an HR Generalist 1, then you become an HR Generalist 2, each with a requirement that you meet, that you have your bachelor's degree, or that then you have 3 years of experience. There's never an opening in the department. There's never an add to staff, or it wasn't as though someone left and you're filling a position. It was just due to the fact that you have obtained some sort of degree, certification, or years of experience. That's really a step promotion. Now, a bid, or kind of an internal that is posted, or that there are comparators, is something completely different. That's really where there's an opening of some sort. Someone has left the organization, and that there is an opening in the department. And what I want to be clear about is the difference between should it be posted and was it posted. It doesn't become a step promotion just because it wasn't posted and someone was kind of tapped on the shoulder and given the promotion. That's not necessarily a step promotion. This really was, there was an opening in the department, and someone was moved into it. Now, whether it was posted and other people were considered, that's something different. And it's really important when you're working internally on this information, or whether you're working with a consultant, to let them know what that was. Because the CCP is going to want to know. And they're going to want to know for a few different reasons. They're going to want to know, is your promotion, what's your promotion policy? Is the posting system open for internal employees to know when there are openings? That there is the ability to move up within the organization, that kind of thing. So it's really important to know the difference between step and a bid type of promotion. Next is the internal promotion documentation. This is one of those things, a lot of times since it's internal, if they didn't fill out that internal application or they didn't fill out this type of form or whatever it was, we're not going to worry about it. It does become an issue, and it is something that you need to be as consistent with as you are your external application process. And next are comparators. There are, when I'm working with promotion data and I start to see issues with regard to adverse impact for people that were promoted into a certain type of job or out of a certain job group, when I ask the question of, okay, who else was considered, what are the comparators, people just don't know. And it's for a couple different reasons. One is, if you have an applicant tracking system, you may not have implemented it for your internal folks yet. Or if you don't have an applicant tracking system that people do electronically, it's a very manual process where people are filling out this, internal movement piece of paper, and kind of keeping all of that together gets really onerous, and it doesn't get organized into some Excel spreadsheet. So knowing and understanding who the comparators are very important, so that both Steffi and I can justify from a litigation or audit perspective what was the reason why you made your decision. Why was this person so much more qualified over all of these other folks? It's very important. If you don't document them, the OFCCP will. So if you say, well, there weren't any comparators, they're going to say to you, well, if this person moved from an account rep position to a sales position, then all the account rep people are, it was a possible comparators for the sales position. And that may or may not be the case. So it's always better that you set the comparators than the OFCCP does it. And, set a promotion process, post it, document it, is very important.
And just one thing to add on there really quickly. When you document your comparators, be very careful and give some thought into how you document them, because that documentation can serve as a memorialization of who you think the comparators for that particular position are. So not necessarily the individuals, but the titles from which they're coming. So think carefully about that, because it's going to be a memorialization of your view of the comparators for that promotion for that particular position. Okay, so let's talk about some common data pitfalls. And with promotions, there are several different pitfalls that we commonly see. And the first one is, if you have an HRIS system, you'll have transactions in there. For promotion, it's typically coded PRO. If you have a pay transaction where somebody's receiving a pay increase or a pay adjustment, that transaction may be coded PAY or something similar. And if you have an employee who's transferring from one position to another or one department or location to another, you'll probably have a record in there to record that transfer. And it may be coded a TRF, or sometimes it's an XRF. The thing is, what constitutes a promotion transaction? The transaction code PRO is not 100% accurate in determining if somebody has been promoted. Pay changes aren't 100% accurate in determining who's been promoted or whether somebody's been promoted. A lot of times we'll see with a promotion, if you have an HRIS system, that there's a cluster of transactions in there surrounding the promotion. There's the promotion event itself, there's a title change, there may be a department change, there's likely to be a pay change, there may be an FLSA status change. All of these things are going to be clustered around that promotion event. And you're going to have multiple transactions. So it's important to really understand what constitutes a promotion. And you really need to look at sort of title comparisons, what Carla was talking about before, the to and the from. We can't just rely on a pay change transaction, for instance, and assume that that means somebody was promoted. We can't look at a transfer transaction or an FLSA change and assume that that's a promotion. And even though we would like to think that a transaction with the code PRO would in fact signify promotion, it's been my experience that data entry errors do happen, and sometimes transactions that really aren't promotions are coded promotions. Sometimes we have people moving laterally from one position to another. It's a movement, but it's not really a promotion, and unfortunately sometimes those kinds of movements get coded with that promotions code. So when you're going through and you're creating your promotions log, don't rely solely on your PRO code. It's a good place to start, and it's probably going to get you, 80–85% of the way. But you really do need to be looking at those title changes to make sure that what the system is coding a promotion really, in fact, is a promotion. So don't rely on your codes, and don't think that your codes are going to be 100% accurate in identifying that population. They'll get you close, but they may not be 100% perfect. The other thing to think about that I see frequently is for organizations that don't have a formal bidding system. They don't have a formal process for posting vacancies. They don't have the ATS equivalent for promotions. They sort of use a tap on the shoulder system. And we've used this term a couple of times. Just to be clear on what we mean, it may be the case where a manager comes up to an employee and says, we've got this opening, or we're creating this new position. You really should, think about whether or not you want this position. If you're interested, let me know. I'll see what I can do. In those kinds of circumstances where it's a tap on the shoulder or sort of a personal interaction that leads to the promotion event, it's very difficult sometimes to identify the appropriate comparators. And unlike a formal bidding process, a tap on the shoulder system isn't going to give you a requisition number. You're not going to have requisition information like you would with a formal bidding system. So the real question here is, who are the comparators? Just because one person was selected and it wasn't posted, like Carla said, doesn't mean that it's not competitive, and it doesn't mean that there weren't comparators. Maybe there were 2 or 3 people who were tapped on the shoulder and said, they were said, this is an opening, we think you might be good for it. If you're interested, let me know and we'll consider you. If 2 or 3 or 4 people were considered and there's no formal system to track those 3 or 4 people considered, it can be really, really difficult to identify the comparators. So my advice from a practical perspective to sort of circumvent this whole thing is try to utilize a formal bidding process wherever possible. Even if the initial communication about the promotion event happens through tap on the shoulder, create a promotion requisition for it, collect that information, get it into your formal system. If you don't have a formal system and every promotion is sort of a tap on the shoulder informal process, you might want to think about implementing some sort of a formal bidding process. It can be a very simple process. It doesn't have to be complex, but it will give you an opportunity as you're going along to collect that information about comparators to make sure that you can get it right. Because as Carla said, if you don't identify those comparators and document them, the OFCCP will. And if you're involved in, EEOC issues, the EEOC is going to determine who those comparators are. If you're involved in private litigation, the plaintiffs are going to tell you who those comparators are. And it's important that you have a documented system to identify who those comparators are for each promotion opportunity. The last area of data pitfalls is a pretty complex one, and it deals with, again, with comparators. Comparators is really the big sticky issue for promotions. And we're looking here at feeder pools and comparators. Well, what do we mean by feeder pools? Feeder pools are the job titles that typically feed into the promotion event. So, for instance, a sales associate typically might be promoted to a senior sales associate or a department lead. An assistant store manager is probably going to be promoted into a manager position. You're not going to take a part-time cashier and promote them to store manager. You might, but it's more common that it would be in some sort of a succession. So what you really need to think about here is what are the job titles of the successful promoted candidates? Where do your store managers, for instance, where were those people before they were store managers? That can help you identify the appropriate feeder pools. And part of the feeder pool is really having historical information. And if you don't have that historical information in your HRIS system, things get very complicated. We're going to see they get complicated when we're talking about compensation too. But for promotions, not having that historical information makes things very, very difficult. So if your current system is not capturing historical information, you need to figure out a way to capture it. You may have to do database backups. You may consider moving to a system that allows you to track that history, because the history is so important when we're analyzing promotion decisions. And what we do from an analysis perspective, if we're looking for adverse impact or disparate treatment, we actually can construct a matrix of those feeder positions. For instance, if we're looking to go back to that store manager position, we might have customer service associates moving into the store manager position. We might have assistant store managers moving into the store manager position. We can figure out what % of the promoted store managers come from each of these jobs. And we can expand that. There may be, locational changes or something like that, so we can say how many associate store managers from within the store were promoted, how many associate managers from outside of the store were promoted. So you basically construct a matrix of these different feeder pools, and we can weight each of those feeder pools based on history. So the real key here to getting reliable feeder pools and comparators is to have access to that history. The other aspect to think about with the feeder pools and the comparators is who the promotion opportunity is advertised to. Is it an internal posting only? Are there requirements that you have to be a current employee, or we're only going to consider current employees for this vacancy? Or is it a combination of internal candidates and an external posting for the vacancy? And that becomes a little tricky if it's internal and external, because whether or not that particular event, the filling of that vacancy, is considered a promotion or a hire depends on who the successful candidate is. If an internal candidate is selected, then it would be considered, assuming that it's a better position. If it's a promotion, if an internal person gets it, it's considered a promotion. If an external person gets it, even though it would be considered a promotion internally, because it's somebody outside, it's considered a hire. So it's really, really important to know where that vacancy was posted, who was allowed to express interest in that position, and who was considered. If it's internal only, you're going to have a different set of circumstances than if it's a combination of internal and external postings for that vacancy. And depending, like I said, depending on the candidate selected, that movement can either be a promotion or a hire, depending on the characteristics of the successful candidate.
And back to Stephanie's matrix about feeder pools. So it's not only great from information from a promotion perspective in terms of knowing your feeder pools for analysis for that, but also understand you use it in creating your affirmative action plan of what are the feeder pools, internal versus external percentages when you are doing your availability analysis for your goals. So keep that in mind also, that information is used for that. Okay. So now we're going to talk about policy and procedure issues. We've talked a lot about these types of things, and we kind of wanted to put one slide together for you to hear about what are the policy and procedure issues, because there seems to be a lot around promotion. And the first one is, and a suggestion, I think you're getting the hint for both Steffi and I, that it's really important to have a set promotion policy and procedure. When there isn't a set promotion policy and procedure, it's very hard for us to put justifications together in the event of an audit or litigation, and the OFCCP, EEOC, or plaintiff's attorney is going to do that for you. So really determine and disseminate this process for application for your internal employees. And I want to highlight determine it and disseminate it, because you really want all your employees to know how and what they need to do in order to apply for jobs internally. And consistency is the key. Making sure that once you've set your policy, once you've disseminated it, all your employees know it, that they all follow the process consistently, and that you as HR people require them to and don't go outside of the process. Another thing is not just from an HR perspective, but managers need to know it and understand it too, so that they know how to give advice to their employees when employees try and go around the process or managers try and go around the process. So from HR to employees to managers, know and understand the process. Next is posting. Posting is the best way to show that you make this an open process, and it's not that tap on the shoulder, behind closed door selection of who gets the promotion. And so you need to think about it in terms of what your options are. So if you have an applicant tracking system or an ATS, think about, are you able to connect it to your intranet so that your employees are able to apply online, and then like your external applicants, all of that information can be tracked in your applicant tracking system. That's one thing to think about. If that's not the case, or it's not the case for all your employees that they would be able to do that, think about paper posting and what that process would look like. Is it posting in break rooms? Is it posting in some kind of gathering area? How are you going to get the word out to all your employees when there are openings? So once you set the policy and procedure, make sure that it's an open process and that you have the ability to post and let all of your employees know about it. And then finally, it kind of seems funny, but define the promotion. I work with a lot of clients, and this can be tricky. What is your definition of a promotion? Is it a change in job title with an increase in pay, or is it a change in job title with an increase in grade or a band? Is it just the job title change that has an increase in responsibilities, and whether pay is adjusted up, it doesn't really matter. So again, a firm definition of what a promotion is important, and then follow it from a transaction perspective. And then once you have that definition, conduct training for those who are inputting those promotion transactions. So whether that's your HRIS department, it's your HR staff, it could even be management. Make sure they understand what that is, they're using the right code, and they're putting them into the system as needed, so you have less cleanup to do going forward.
Okay, so let's talk about the effect of missing data, and we really should expand the title of the slide to say the effect of missing and or incorrect data. And a lot of the things we're going to talk about we touched on last week, and really the effect of missing or bad data is going to be the same regardless of the selection process you're looking at. And the first thing is, if you have missing data or if you have bad data, you're going to have a bad AAP. And as I said last week, the statistics are only as good as the data that generates them. So if you have incorrect data, if you have missing data, that problem can make you think that you have a potential issue that's not really there. It can also mask an issue that really should be addressed, that's a real problem, but you don't see that problem because you've got missing or incomplete data. So it's really, really important to have clean, comprehensive data. That's going to be the best bet for getting a good AAP, generating good insights from that AAP in terms of what you need to do from an organizational perspective. The other issue is the time and expense and resources, and we talked a lot about this last week, so we'll just go through it quickly today. Missing and or incorrect data is very, very time-consuming and expensive to fix. And as we said, there's an internal cost and there's an external cost. It takes time and effort to fill in those gaps. It can delay the results. It can tie up your people. If they're focusing on cleaning up this data and spending a lot of time chasing around data points, they're not going to be focusing on their primary responsibilities. That's going to lead to a reduction in productivity. So it's not only a financial expense of, perhaps having to go back and forth with your consultant about we're missing this data point, we're missing that data point. It's also a time sink, and it's a drain on your resources.
And also a reminder, when you get that audit letter, you have 2 days to respond. So time is definitely of the essence when it comes to getting your AAP together, and bad data can make those 30 days go very quickly.
And from an audit or a litigation perspective, I'll talk about the litigation perspective, and Carla will talk to the audit issue. Bad data or missing data really can put you in a difficult position in terms of defending yourself. Like we've mentioned a couple of times, the central issue, I think, with promotions centers around the comparators. And if you don't have good data, clean data, complete data on the comparators for each promotion event, it's really going to be a nightmare to try to defend those decisions in litigation. Because, as we said, the plaintiff is going to tell you who the appropriate comparators are, the EEOC is going to tell you, the Department of Labor is going to tell you, the OFCP is going to tell you. So if you have missing data points, if you don't have complete and comprehensive information about all your promotion events, who was considered, who was eligible, who met the time and job restrictions, who satisfied the particular certification or licensing qualifications, if you're missing any of those kinds of things, it's not only a problem from a data perspective. Your data can actually undermine what you're saying about your policy. If you say that, we have a 2-month time and job restriction for promotions to this particular title, but your comparator data and your bidding system doesn't support that, that's going to put you in a really bad spot in terms of defending that time and job restriction. So clean, comprehensive data, accurate data is the best way to defend yourself in the event of any problems.
With regard to audits, a couple different things. If you have data that shows that you have adverse impact to a more standard deviation, and we don't have the documentation and the comparators to show that it was the business justification for those choices, you can end up in a conciliation agreement for discrimination with regard to promotions. And also, if they ask for backup data, your documentation, and you don't have it, you could also be in a conciliation agreement for record keeping, that those are employment records that you either don't have or didn't keep. So that can be an issue also. Okay, we're going to talk a little bit about data scrubbing and validation. What are some of the steps that we take with our clients to help clean up the data throughout the process, whether it's an AAP audit or litigation? So the first one is really identifying what your promotion policy is, and helping the client understand what's the definition of the promotion in order to evaluate that promotion data. So if I go through and look at all of these data points of title changes and pay increases, knowing what that promotion policy is the first step, so that I can look at all these different types of transactions that have happened and to help work with the client to determine which one of them are actual promotions. The next thing to look at once you've got your definition of a promotion is, do we have the right people? And the first thing that a lot of times that I ask clients to do is just do a data pull of anyone who has had a title change in that date range. So if you know that your like the transactions that Stephanie was talking about earlier aren't 100% accurate, just start with every title change during the date range that we're talking about. And then we start analyzing based on the promotion definition. Another step that I take is comparing the last year's AAP workforce snapshot with the current year's AAP workforce snapshot and identifying anybody who meets that definition of a promotion. So I look at what was their job title last year, what was their job title this year, what was their salary grade or salary last year versus this year, and anybody who meets that established definition of a promotion, then I make sure that those people are on the promotion log. So those are some validation steps to make sure that you have all of the right people that got promotions within the date range on your log, and you're evaluating them. Next is, do we have the right code? So on top of having the definition of a promotion, do you have the right people? It's important to have your codes right. And what do I mean by codes? These are your EEO1 or your AA job group codes. Those are the basis upon which you do your adverse impact or discrimination evaluation a lot of times. And so you really want to have your workforce snapshot as your master document. So by job title, what is the EEO1 and AA job group code by job title, and then you want to go and compare that with the titles on your promo log, both from and to. So that way you have consistent EEO1 and AA job group codes by job title throughout all of the logs on your affirmative action plan, and you're doing the correct analysis for it.
One of the things that I continually look for when I'm scrubbing data, helping clients scrub data, and validating that data, the central question I always have is, are we consistent? And we talked about this last time. We talked about automation and how computers make things a lot easier. We can do these analyses a lot faster, but computers are essentially dumb. So if you have a title, for instance, that's MGR, and you have another title that has the word manager spelled out, those are really treated as different job titles from the computer's perspective. So any kind of variation in your titles, your job codes, your job descriptions, all those things are going to make it difficult. They're going to increase the time and the cost of the analysis. So you want to make sure that your data is consistent within itself and that you're coding things the same way for the same kinds of records. The other aspect of consistency with respect to promotion, again, goes back to comparators. Comparators are very, very, very important when you're looking at the promotion data. And when we're talking about feeder pools and comparators and consistency, what we mean is, do we have consistency within job title? Do we have consistency within locations? And do we have consistency with our promotion policies and procedures? So if you were going to construct feeder pools using historical information about who had been promoted to the store manager position and where they came from, does our data support the idea that store managers were promoted from assistant store managers and sales representatives? Or do we see, a variation, a wide variation in the from title getting to the store manager position? If there's consistency, that's a good thing. If there's wide variation, then you may need to go back and look at that to make sure that your codes are correct, to make sure that your processes are really being followed, and to figure out, whether or not your feeder pool definition needs to be adjusted based on what you're seeing in your data. We also want to look for consistency within locations. So it's not just within job titles. Is the same location doing things consistently? Do we see the same kinds of movements over and over again within the location, or do we have wide variations? And looking at these feeder pools and the comparators and looking at the to and the from titles really can help you figure out whether or not your stated policies and procedures for promotions are being followed. Just because you have a policy that says, a certain thing about promotions, the way that promotions are done, doesn't mean that everybody's following that procedure. So looking for consistency within your comparator groups and your feeder pools is really a good way to figure out if your policies and procedures are being followed, and it can help you figure out whether or not you need to make revisions to those policies and procedures. And then finally, I look for where are the data gaps. And again, here we're looking at random gaps versus systemic gaps. Is it a one-off situation where we're missing one piece of data for one person, or are we missing the same piece of data for hundreds of people? Identifying where those gaps are and whether they're random or systemic can really help you identify any shortcomings or any problems in your procedures, in your policies, in your data capture, in your history retention, all those kinds of things. So figuring out where your data gaps are can help you correct those problems if those problems exist, and it'll help prevent those problems from occurring in the future. And just like we said last week with hiring, the data scrubbing and validation really is an interactive process. Both Carla and I work very closely with the client in this process to make sure that we get the data as clean as we can and that all of the data is validated. And, no data set is going to be 100% perfect all the time. But the idea is to get it as close to perfect as possible. And for promotions, one of the things that I really focus on is the title pairings, the to job characteristics and the from job characteristics. That's really, really important when we're looking at promotions. And it really highlights the need to retain that historical information. If your system isn't capturing it, you really need to figure out a way to preserve that information because it's really, really important when you're studying the promotion process.
And this is, I find that the promotion process is one of the most important areas to really have an interactive discussion with your client because this is one of the areas where there's just less rigorous tracking and documentation as compared to hire and applicant data. So I do spend a lot of time with my clients going through definition of promotion, what's your process, discussing, and it can be sometimes line by line with them, what am I finding from a systemic issue? How can we help fix things going forward? And that's part of the interactive process. If you let it be interactive with us, is we can help you find where your data gaps are and then help you find the process that will make it easier in the future.
And just to sort of summarize things, we've got about 8 minutes left just to sort of tie everything together. Promotions really allow you to look at the movements going on within your organization. And a promotions analysis as part of your affirmative action program can really help identify barriers. An example of a barrier that probably everybody's heard of is the glass ceiling in terms of promotion of women. The glass ceiling is something that the regulators and private litigators are very interested in. We've seen a lot of gender discrimination in promotion claims recently. It's something you need to be concerned about. Age and promotion is another particularly problematic pairing. There's a lot of age discrimination claims surrounding promotion events. So when you're looking at promotions, you really need to have extremely tight documentation on qualifications, performance ratings, and all those other criteria that you use in your decision-making process. And all of those criteria really need to be validated and tested for adverse impact before you start using them in your promotion decisions. So the two hot spots to watch out for here are the glass ceiling and promotions in women and age and promotion. That's primarily what I see within the realm of promotions claims.
So not only under affirmative action do you have the requirement to do your adverse impact and find where you have issues, but it's to find those issues and barriers that you have with regard to EEO, and then also create programs to eliminate them. And if you don't have clean data, good analysis, good processes and policies and procedures, any programs that you put together are not going to be effective. And I know we talked about this before with the hiring. It's going to be true of each in the series that we talk about. Without good data, you cannot find your issues and barriers, and you cannot put together good programs to help fix it.
Yep. If you don't have good data, you can't identify your problems, and if you can't identify your problems, you can't fix them.
So I think at this point we're finished up. I'm at this point not seeing any questions from anybody through the chat window. I'll give it a minute just to see if anybody's typing now that it's the end of the presentation. The final slide is our contact information for both of us, both phone numbers, email address, and our website. Feel free to contact us anyway. Both of our websites have information, whether it be blogs or newsletters or ebooks or so there's a lot of podcasts. There's a lot of great information with regard to promotions and AAPs and data in general. So if you have any need for some material to help you get to sleep at night, feel free to visit both of our websites to find that. So other than that, I'm not seeing any questions come through. I just want to thank you for being a part of the second in our series of getting back to the basics for Affirmative Action Plan.
Thanks, everybody.